Okay, are we prepared to proceed? All right, if the coordinator could put the agenda up, please. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is under live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Oak-Charon, Heather McLean, and Stan Wilder. My name is Michael Wildman and I will be chairing this hearing today. Procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we will hear oral submissions from any interested parties. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each application was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear an application, and without it, we may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary, and we understand that we will be doing several oral oaths today. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application, followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, stating your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. So before we begin, are there any declarations of interest from committee members? Seeing none, we will be confirming 4 sets of minutes. And before we do that, does any member wish to raise any issues or concerns with the 4 sets of minutes for April 6th, April 20th, May 4th, and May 18th? Seeing none, committee members, can we then vote on them individually on April 6 minutes? Are they approved? That is approved. April 20th? Approved. May 4th? Approved. And May 18th? Approved. Thank you. Okay. We're going to be dealing with the adjournment requests that we have received. So with that, we will move to those and we will be asking for comments from staff and from the proponents only on the matter of the adjournment. So the first matter that we'll be considering for adjournment are items 1 and 2 for 261, 263 Cambridge Street. And we understand this request has come from staff. If we could have staff advise us on the request.
Yes, Mr. Chair, staff have had ongoing conversations with the applicant to revise the plans to address questions and non-compliance issues. One of the revisions that was made was for widening the driveway to bring it into compliance with the zoning bylaw. However, this change needs to be reflected in the 4R plan to accurately represent the proposed easements. So an adjournment will allow time for the applicant to make the necessary updates to the plans and to the application.
Okay, stand by, please, and we'll hear from the applicants, please. The applicants, if you would introduce yourselves with your names and your address, please.
Hi there. My name is Catherine Moore. This is my husband, Frank Johnston Main. We are the owners of 261 and 263 Cambridge Street North. Our address is 118 Riverdale in Ottawa. I understand the request for the adjournment. The requested change on the draft R4 is very minor. We have agreed to it on the site plan. to be honest, we have been back and forth on this. Ms. Linker has been extremely helpful for the last 2 weeks or so, but prior to her starting in this position, we were sort of left floundering a little bit because of the lack of staff support with her predecessor in that position. Delaying this by however many weeks or potentially months, I suppose, will be incredibly frustrating. And we would ask the committee to consider accepting the draft R4 with the understanding of amending the width of the driveway.
Do any members of committee have any comments on anything heard today? Have you looked into how long it would take you to amend your plans? Have you gotten any information on that?
I have reached out to the surveyor. We're using Annis O'Sullivan, Volbeck. They are working on it. I really only found out that I would need to make this amendment on Monday. I've reached out to them on Monday afternoon. I'm hoping to get this back from them this week. I'm sure the committee knows that all of these services are extremely busy this time of year and for the last 2 years.
So you've been told you might get it back this week?
Yes, I should get it back this week. I expect to, but obviously.
Right. And to committee staff, if we were to adjourn for one meeting, would it fit on the agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there is room on the July 20th agenda.
So to the applicants, my advice to you, and I appreciate your comments, my advice to you is you really should get it done right and put it through the committee. The way that staff is recommending, it will prevent any potential for debate over what's shown on a plan and what we deliberated upon. So it would be my recommendation to the committee members that we do adjourn until the next meeting to allow time for that plan to be done. Committee members, do you have any comments on that? And Ms. Oakeshott?
Yes, I agree. I think that's a good idea.
Thank you. Ms. McLean?
Yes, I think we need to see the revised reference plan as well as any elevation or changes to the elevation plans. I think it needs to be before us before we can make a decision.
Thank you. So on adjournment to the next meeting. Okay, that is carried. We will see you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item up for adjournment is 125 Prince Albert Street. If we could have, the request was made by the agent, so if we could have the agent and staff as well speak to this. So we'll start with the agent first.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Justine Garbos. I'm the agent on this file.
And your address for the record, please.
It is 2611 Queensview Drive, Suite 300.
Thank you. And on adjournment?
Yes, I agree to the adjournment, and my client's preference is that it be adjourned to the next available hearing on July 20th.
Okay, just stand by for a moment. And staff, if we could have your comments as well.
Yes, we agree with the adjournment request so that the updates to the plans can be made, the revisions to bring the plans into compliance with the zoning bylaw, or further minor variances can be added to the application, and the tree information report can be updated for adequacy.
Okay, and so when can all of this be done by? So I'll ask, when does staff need it in order that we can get this on the next closest agenda?
I believe as soon as possible would be appropriate for the forester to review the tree information report, and the minor variances should be listed for accuracy, and the revisions should be made as soon as possible.
And so to the agent, when can you get everything in and in for review?
Yes, Mr. Chair. My client is confident that they will be able to get things in within the next couple of weeks to make that July 20th date. He's currently working with an arborist to address forestry's comments, and we do not anticipate any additional variances beyond the 3 per each unit that we have submitted for.
Okay, so the next meeting is in 2 weeks. So to committee staff, what's the date that that this should be in?
Mr. Chair, we would just ask that all materials be filed at least 5 days in advance to be able to circulate them to members. In addition to the commenting time that planning staff and forestry staff would require to be able to prepare their reports.
So let's put that at a week. Can you do that within a week? You can?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we can get the materials in for the 13th.
Okay, Mr. Wilder?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Sorry, yes. We just been advised, Mr. Wildman, that the forester, I believe, is on vacation. It was just brought to our attention, I guess, at our pre-hearing. I'm not certain whether or not someone is there to replace her. Maybe the planner can tell us that if she's aware that the planner's away. Also, Ms. Linker, you were saying that in your mind, there might be additional variances required. So has this been cleared up between you and the agent in terms of additional variances? If there's additional variances, obviously we're going to need recirculation, will we not?
Yes, I am aware that Miss Nancy Young has somebody covering off for her during her vacation. So there will be somebody available to review the updated tree information report. In terms of the minor variances, I know that the applicant was discussing revising the plans to accommodate for hearing today. However, I'm not sure if those revisions were made or if they're going to proceed with additional minor variances to the application.
So Ms. Garbos, do you anticipate having to have additional minor variances? Because member Wilder is correct, there would be a need for recirculation if there were. What's your plans?
At this point in time, I'm not aware that we will be seeking any additional variances. So the 3 that we have submitted for include increases in height and reductions to the rear lot areas and setbacks. So those 3 variances per unit are to remain. Should there be a need to revise the plans that will generate additional variances based on the forestry's comments and accommodating those comments, then certainly we understand that there will be a need for recirculation. But at this point in time, I'm not aware that we have triggered any additional variances beyond the 3 that we've requested.
Okay. So you have 2 options. You can attempt to get to follow that path and get your information in as we discussed by I think you said the 13th, or you can request that it be adjourned sine die to allow for some maneuvering should there be a need to do that. What's your preference?
At this point in time, my client's preference is targeting August or July 20th rather. So July 13th is what we commit to providing revised plans and the TIR. Okay, so as long as you understand there may be a little bit of risk there in the case of requiring an additional variance and having to recirculate. You understand that? Understood. And just for my own awareness and my client's awareness, should there be a need for additional variances, what is the committee's schedule looking like? Like how soon can we come before the panel? I'll ask committee staff to just elaborate, please.
Mr. Chair, it will depend on when we get all the materials we need, including the fee for recirculation, if that's the case. But at this point in time, it would be likely the 2nd meeting in August, if not the 1st in September.
Okay, so you've heard that and you're still comfortable proceeding with the 20th under that understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Members of committee, are we prepared to vote on adjournment then? Okay, adjournment to July 20th. That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, panel members.
Okay, we are going to move now to item 7, 155 Fifth Avenue. This is requested by staff on a sine die. So if we could have staff first begin. I'm gathering this is not Miss Linker. Committee staff, which planner is this? Are they online right now?
Mr. Chair, it is Margot Linker.
Okay.
My apologies. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, a variance request was for the eaves projection that permits 0 meters from the lot line, whereas they should not be located within 0.3 meters from the lot line. So the adjournment was requested for the applicant to add a minor variance for the eave projection.
Okay, and you're suggesting sine die likely on the same basis as what we just discussed with the previous applicant because of the need for recirculation?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and is the applicant present?
Maurice Quinn from Capacity Engineering.
Mr. Quinn, your address, please, for the record.
Unit 2D, 220 Terrence Matthews.
Okay, you've heard the representations by both committee staff in terms of what you would be up against if you were to wish to proceed and have this recirculated and the timelines that are most likely to occur. You've heard from planning staff as well. Do you have any comments on adjournment?
None other than we had hoped to get it dealt with, but I think our client is understanding that sometimes these things require a process.
Okay. Members of the committee, any comments, questions? Okay, on adjournment, sine die. That is carried. And we have one late request or later request for adjournment. That is item 11. I believe that is Ms. Dow, if I recall correctly.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee.
And Ms. Dow, your address for the record, please.
43 Eccles Street, Unit C.
Okay, and on the matter of adjournment.
Yes, so we would like to request an adjournment to the August 3rd hearing. Since the previous hearing date, we've been working back and forth with Hydro Ottawa just to deal with some technical matters and locates beside the, from the existing building and proposed addition to the existing hydro line along Gilmore Street. So it's just taken some additional time than anticipated to speak with the right people and make sure that the plans are reviewed appropriately and get confirmation back that they're comfortable we may proceed to committee.
And I gather the storm hasn't helped keep things on track as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, planning staff, do you have any comments?
No, Mr. Chair, we're fine with the adjournment request.
Thank you. Members of the committee, we fine with the adjournment as requested? Okay. Carried. Thank you, Ms. Stywell.
Thanks very much.
All right, we'll jump back to the agenda. And we will be hearing item number 4. It's a consent application 474-476 Bevan. And I believe folks from Novatech, Mr. Miller and or Mr. Chown will be speaking.
Yep. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Two things. I need to administer the oath, but if I could have your name and your address, please, for the record.
Yep, Caleb Miller, and from 240 Michael Copeland Drive, Suite 101.
Okay, and on the oath, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do.
Thank you. If you could give us a brief overview and walk us through the application, please.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The applications in front of you this afternoon are severances for the property municipally known as 474 and 476 Bevan Avenue. The requested severances will facilitate an under construction semi-detached dwelling. Next slide, please. The subject site is located within the Kitchissippi ward of the City of Ottawa on the west side of Bevan Avenue. The subject property is shown within Westboro in relation to Westboro Beach, Highland Park, and Carlington. Next slide, please. The subject site is located south of Wesley Avenue, north of Iona Street, west of Dawson Avenue, and east of Belford Crescent. The subject site is an interior lot with an area of 464.3 meters squared and 15.24 meters of frontage on Bevan Avenue. The subject site is currently occupied by an under construction semi-detached building. Several lots on Bevan Avenue are subdivided. The requested severances will create lots consistent with 6 subdivided lots on the east side of Bevan Avenue and 6 subdivided lots on the west side of Bevan Avenue. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows the draft reference plan. The applications seek to split the existing lot into 2. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows Severance Application 1. This application will create the northerly lot labeled as Part 1 on the draft reference plan. Part 1 will have an area of 232 meters squared and 7.62 meters of frontage on Bevan Street. Part 1 will be occupied by 1 unit of the under construction semi-detached dwelling. Part 1 fully conforms to the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows Severance Application 2. This application will create the southerly lot labeled as Part 2 on the draft reference plan. Part 2 will have an area of 232.2 meters squared and 7.6 meters of frontage on Bevan Avenue. Part 2 will be occupied by 1 unit of the under construction semi-detached dwelling. Part 2 fully conforms to the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. We will now speak quickly to the rationale for the severances. With respect to,
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. With respect to 53(1) of the Planning Act, a plan of subdivision is not required for the properly and orderly development of the municipality. With respect to 51(24) of the Planning Act, we have to say the following. A, the proposed development has regard for the following matters of provincial interest: the supply, efficient use, conservation of energy and water, the adequate provision and efficient use of communication, transportation, sewage and water services, and waste management systems, the minimization of waste, the orderly development of safe and healthy communities, the appropriate location of growth and development, and the promotion of development that is designed to be sustainable, to support public transit, and to be oriented to pedestrians. B, the subject property has access to hard and soft services, so the severance of the lot is not premature. C, the subject site is designated as general urban area in the in-force City of Ottawa official plan. The in-force City of Ottawa official plan encourages and supports infill and intensification in the urban area. The requested severances will result in the intensification of an existing lot within the general urban area. The requested severances will result in 2 fully conforming lots that will accommodate 2 ground-oriented units where 1 exists today. The subject site is designated neighborhood in the council-adopted City of Ottawa official plan. The subject site is located within the inner urban transect in the council adopted City of Ottawa official plan. The council adopted City of Ottawa official plan encourages and supports intensification and infill developments in the neighborhoods located within the interurban transect. The requested severances would facilitate intensification within an approximately 15-minute walk of 22 bus stops, as well as the proposed Westboro Light Rail Transit Station. This station will provide light rail transit services as part of the Light Rail Transit Stage 2 expansion. D, the requested severances will facilitate the development of two semi-detached units, which are permitted uses in the R2G zone. The requested severances will result in 2 lots that fully comply to the R2G lot width and lot area requirement for a semi-detached dwelling. The requested severances, the requested severances will result in lots that fully comply with the R2D lot width and lot area requirements for a semi-detached dwelling. The proposed lot widths and lot areas are compatible with existing land use patterns and the lot fabric of the neighborhood. I, the existing semi-detached dwelling is connected to existing utilities and municipal services. As such, adequate municipal services are available to service the site. And J, there are several schools located in proximity to the subject property, including Hilson Avenue Public School, 600 meters from the subject site, Westboro Montessori School, 750 meters from the subject site, and Bluefest School of Music and Art, 850 meters from the subject site. Next slide, please. The requested severances will support a permitted form of housing that complements the pattern, scale, and the desirable characteristics of the neighborhood. The proposed lots have regard for matters of provincial interest, are not premature, are in the public interest, conform to the in-force and council adopted official plan, are suitable for the land, will have adequate utilities and municipal services, are located close to schools, and utilize services efficiently. The proposed development represents good land use planning. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. You stuck exactly to the 5 minutes, so we appreciate that. It was very thorough. Thank you. Members of, Mr. Chown, would you like to add something?
Just quickly, Mr. Chair, with respect to the conditions, I believe that you may have received an update from Mr. Hamilton with respect to this application and deletion of condition 1 related to the payment of cash in lieu of parking. Otherwise, we have no comments on the recommended conditions for the severances.
Yes, thank you. And I was just going to ask Mr. Hamilton to walk us through his suggested change. Thank you, Mr. Chown. So, Mr. Hamilton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant and building code services have indicated that the dwellings are nearing completion, so cash in lieu of parkland is no longer appropriate on this severance.
Thank you. And do you have any other comments on this, on the presentation or the application, Mr. Hamilton?
Nothing from myself.
Okay, members of committee, any questions? Ms. McLean?
Just note that the public notice showed a frontage of 7.63 for part 1, and I think I heard and saw that it was 7.62, so perhaps a slight amendment to that.
Mr. Chown or Mr. Miller, do you have any feedback on that?
Yes, the frontage is 7.62 meters on both parts of the lot.
Okay, we'll make sure that the record reflects accurately your comments. Any other comments from members of committee? All right, so as staff and Mr. Chown have indicated, the cash in lieu condition, which was condition 1, is being removed. So that leaves 4 remaining: tree planting plan, servicing plan, JUMA, and grading plan. You're aware of those?
Yes, we are, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So on the application, members of the committee, are we ready to vote? Okay, on approval. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chown and Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. We are moving to applications 5 and 6 on the agenda. These are 62 Sterling Avenue. And I take it, Mr. Miller, you're sticking around for purpose?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and just we've noted your name and address, so you don't have to repeat it again, but we will do the oath. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good afternoon again, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The applications in front of you for this application are for minor variance and severance applications for the property municipally known as 62 Sterling Avenue. Next slide, please. The subject site is located in the Kitchissippi ward of the City of Ottawa on the west side of Sterling Avenue. You can see the property on the image in front of you in relation to neighboring communities. Next slide, please. The subject site is a corner lot in an area bounded by Le Désir to the north, Armstrong Street to the south, Hinchy Avenue to the west, and Pinhay Street to the east. The subject site is a corner lot with 8.65 meters of frontage along Sterling Avenue, 30.18 meters of frontage along Le Désir Street, and an area of 267.1 meters squared. The subject site is occupied by a detached dwelling with driveway having access off of Le Désir Street. Next slide, please. The proposal seeks to split the existing lot into two. Part 1 and Part 2 are shown on the draft reference plan in front of you. The surrounding area is characterized by lots generally with a lot width of 5 or 10 meters. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows Severance Application 1. This application will create the eastern lot labeled as Part 1 on the draft reference plan. Part 1 will have a total area of 129 meters squared, a depth of 14.8 meters, and a frontage of 8.6 meters on Sterling Avenue. Next slide, please. The image in front of you shows Severance Application 2. This application will create the western lot labeled as Part 2 on the draft reference plan. Part 2 will have a total area of 134.3 meters squared, a depth of 7.8 meters, and a frontage of 15.3 meters on Le Désir Street. Next slide, please. If you could actually go back one slide, my apologies. We will now speak briefly to the rationale for the severances. With respect to 53(1) of the Planning Act, a plan of subdivision is not required for the proper and orderly development of the municipality. With respect to 51(24) of the Planning Act, we have the following to say. A, the proposed development has regard for various matters of provincial interest, including the orderly development of safe and healthy communities. B, the severance of the lot is not premature since the subject property is located within a fully developed neighborhood where hard and soft services are available. C, the subject site is designated general urban area on Schedule B of the in-force City of Ottawa official plan. The in-force City of Ottawa official plan encourages and supports infill and intensification within the general urban area. The proposed severances result in intensification of an existing lot within the general urban area. With respect to council adopted official plan, the subject property is located within the neighborhood designation of the inner urban area transect. This subject property is also located within the evolving neighborhood overlay. The requested severances will facilitate gradual change in character that supports intensification towards the target densities set out in section 3.2 of the in-force official plan. The D and F, the proposed severances will result in two lots that require relief from lot area and requirements for a semi-detached dwelling in the R4 UB zone. as well as relief for rooftop access setback requirements of Section 55 of the zoning bylaw. The proposed lot areas are compatible with the existing land use patterns and the lot fabric of the neighborhood. The dimensions of the proposed lots do not inhibit the functionality of the site. I, adequate municipal services are available to service the site. J, there are a number of schools located within the vicinity of the subject site. For example, St. Francois d'Assise is located 550 meters from the subject site. Connaught Public School is located 600 meters from the subject site. And Devonshire Community Public School is located 900 meters from the subject site. It is our opinion that the severances meet all criteria under the Planning Act for severances. Next slide, please. The slide in front of you highlights the requested variances. Variances are required to support a reduction in lot area for each of the proposed lots, as well as to permit a reduced setback requirement for the rooftop access on Part 2. The requested lot area for Part 1 is 129.5 meters squared, and the requested lot area for Part 2 is 134 meters squared. 134.3 meters squared. The requested setback for the rooftop access on Part 2 is 0 meters. We will now speak briefly to the rationale for the minor variances of the 4 tests of Section 45(1) of the Planning Act. Next slide, please. The first test for minor variance is that the general intent of the purpose of the official plan is maintained. The subject property is designated general urban area on Schedule B of the in-force City of Ottawa official plan. The purpose of this designation is to permit development of a full range and choice of housing types to meet the needs of all ages, incomes, and life circumstances. The proposed development application for the subject property is an example of intensification in the general urban area, providing a range and choice of housing types. The subject property is designated neighborhood on Schedule B2 of the City of Ottawa official plan, the council adopted official plan. The purpose of this designation is to permit a mix of building forms and densities. The requested minor variances would enhance the urban pattern of built form by providing similar lot sizes as is already predominant along Sterling Avenue, Lettier Street, and the surrounding area, as illustrated by the image in front of you. The minor variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the in-force and council adopted official plan. The second test for minor variance is that general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The subject property is zoned R4UB under the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw. The requested minor variances are to facilitate the development for a semi-detached dwelling, which is listed as a permitted use under the R4 zoning. The requested variances for lot area is consistent with the lot fabric of the existing neighborhood. The properties highlighted on the image in front of you that you are seeing now all have lot areas less than 130 meters squared. The requested variances will facilitate the development of appropriate and compatible lot sizes when compared to the surrounding lot fabric and reduce the impact of infill development from the streetscape. The minor variances meet the general intent and purposes of the zoning bylaw. The third test for minor variance is that the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of land. These 2 variances are considered desirable for the use of land as infill development supports intensification, while having regard for existing uses, built form, and lot fabric of the neighborhood. As shown on the image in front of you, there are a lot of examples of similar lots in the neighborhood and on Sterling Avenue. Next slide, please. The relief being sought for rooftop access is a result of the proposed severance. The severance redefines the rear wall of the building on Part 2. The proposed rooftop access location is permissible if there was no severance. This minor variance would allow for the rooftop access to have a reduced impact on the streetscape, maintaining the intent of Section 55 of the zoning bylaw. The reduced lot areas are consistent with the surrounding built form. The reduced setback requirements for rooftop access allows for the location of these accesses to remain in a location that minimizes its impact on the streetscape. The proposed variances promotes intensification and fits in with the overall character of the neighborhood. Intensification is further supported by the availability of services in the surrounding area. The subject site is located an approximately 10-minute walk from the light rail transit station at Tunney's Pasture. The subject site is located approximately 8-minute walk from the light rail transit station at Bayview. The subject site is within walking distance from the light rail transit stations, making it an ideal location for intensification. The subject site is near bus stops along Scott Street, which are served by the 57, 61, and 75 bus routes. Other bus stops are available along Parkdale, which are served by the 14 bus route. The proximity on Scott Street provides access to public transit. The proposed minor variances will facilitate a development that supports active and public transit-oriented intensification. The subject property is near many neighborhood amenities, such as shops, restaurants, and along Wellington Street. The minor variances requested facilitate an appropriate form of scale and development near established neighborhood amenities and transit routes. The minor variances are considered desirable for the land use. And lastly, the fourth test for minor variance is that the variance is considered minor in nature. The requested variances seek to permit a lot area that will not affect the functionality of the site and will have no impact on the streetscape. As previously mentioned, the proposed development is consistent with this street. As I mentioned in the previous slide, many semi-detached dwellings on Sterling Avenue have lot areas comparable to the requested severances with the requested consent. The requested minor variance for rooftop access setback on Part 2 allows for the rooftop access to be located further from the streetscape and to reduce the impact visible from the street. This location would also be permissible if the proposed development was being proposed without a severance. The proposed minor variances will have no impact on the streetscape and will fit in with the neighborhood. The variances are considered minor in nature. And the last slide, please. It is our opinion that the requested minor variances meet all four tests of the minor variance of the Planning Act. The requested severances will support a permitted form of housing that complements the pattern, scale, and desirable characteristics of the neighborhood. The proposed lots have regards for matters of provincial interest, are not premature, are in the public interest, conform to the in-force and council-adopted official plans, are suitable for the land, will have adequate utilities and municipal services, are located close to schools, and utilize services efficiently. The proposed development, requested severances, and requested minor variances represent good land use planning. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, very good on your timing. Mr. Hamilton, do you have anything you'd like to say before we move to an additional speaker and questions of committee?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are no comments from myself. Staff have a no concerns report submitted for this application.
Okay, and you have 7 requested conditions that you would like to see included?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just before we go to questions of committee members, we have another speaker, Ms. Hode.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the panel. I submitted
Ms. Hode, just your address for the record, please.
Yes, my address is 509-1000 Wellington Street West.
Thank you.
So, as you will have seen in our letter, that we are not opposing this application, but we do have some concerns. I'd like to reiterate a few of them. I think the first is something that we bring up regularly, and I don't think it's yet a city policy, and that is replacing asphalt with permeable pavers wherever possible. In this case, it would be the driveway. I think the walkways may already be permeable. I think it's very important, and I don't know whether you could add this as a condition, unless it's in the bylaw, which I'm not aware of. I think it is important. We're having a climate emergency. Good drainage is very important. Secondly, I'd just like to speak about the trees. Again, I don't think that you are, strictly speaking, responsible for the trees, but the tree report and the forester will have some input in this. And we would like to recommend not the small trees, because we have enough small trees, I think, in Hintonburg, and we're losing larger trees. So we would recommend or request that the forester approve. And again, these trees are planted on city property, so they may have some authority there. And we would like 3 rather than 2 and money. There are not that many places to plant trees, so money may not be very useful to us. And finally, I would just like to address the floor plans. I don't know to what extent you're able to impose anything, but since I submitted the letter, I was able to go and do some research in the urban design guidelines for low-rise infill housing, where it states in several different places that key internal uses should be at street level in order to contribute to the animation, safety, and security of the street. On narrow lots, the Infill Guideline 8.1 says design houses where the principal living space is at grade. There certainly are windows and doors facing the street, but a principal living space is not, in my view, a guest bedroom, which is what the plans indicate. And I guess I'm slightly concerned, although I did check into the secondary unit requirements. I think a secondary dwelling unit may not be an issue, other than the fact that do you need a guest bedroom and a secondary dwelling unit? It seems to me there's way too much house here. You could put the guest bedroom in the basement, lower the whole thing by 1 floor, and still have all the house that seems to be for the use of the principal residence. So I just leave that with you. I don't know what you can do about it, but it certainly is a concern that the proposed use of the ground floor is a guest bedroom, and that certainly does not conform with the urban infill guidelines for low-rise housing. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And we appreciate your comments. Many of them are beyond the scope of this committee, but we appreciate them. And should there be an avenue for staff to address any of your comments, I'm sure they'll work with the proponent to do that. Mr. Wilder, do you have a comment? You're muted, Mr. Wilder.
Is that better? Sorry.
Yes.
I guess I do find, to be honest with you, I realize it's a corner property. I still find this, and I realize this is a larger site than others, but I still find this, again, we're putting in secondary dwellings here. I don't particularly care for the design, but that's not a factor here. However, what I would like to see is with regards to variance C, I realize that if these were going to be 2 rental properties and it was not being severed, we'd be looking at a different situation. They're going to be severing the property here. We got variance C before us, if I'm correct. I noticed that staff themselves recognize that we're dealing with a narrow floor plate, limiting the flexibility for the stair access. I will have an issue here. Can I see some photos, please, of that, the rooftop access and the rooftop terrace, please? If we have any photos, please.
We don't have any photos, Mr. Wilder, but we do have a roof plan or a site plan showing that. If the committee coordinator could put the presentation back up.
Jeez.
Is there, can we go to the site plan that shows where the location of that rooftop access is? Thank you. Maybe we can, I don't know if the committee coordinator can zoom in on it at all. Actually, there's slide sorry, the slide 50 that actually highlights the rooftop access was probably the clearest illustration. There we go.
I see. All right. Huh. All right. And there really is, there really is no way, there's no possibility of providing additional setback for that access, I guess, eh? We're just, geez.
No, so to reiterate the comments from Mr. Miller in his presentation, and Mr. Wilder has acknowledged this in his comments. This variance wouldn't even be before the committee if we weren't severing the property. We could have taken a strategy where we only applied for the minor variances for lot area. Our client, assuming the committee approved those variances, our client goes ahead, draws his building permit, builds the building, then comes back later with a severance application and the minor variance for the rooftop access. By then it would be built. It would have been built fully conforming to the zoning bylaw. We want to be transparent with the committee and the community and the neighbors. And so we've brought all the applications together to the committee today. But understand that we don't need that variance to build the house with the rooftop access in that location today. We are simply trying to be transparent in seeking the relief as part of the package today. And so, would encourage the committee to recognize that the only reason we have this application is that the defined rear yard lot line changes as a result of the severance application. Otherwise, the variance wouldn't be before you at all.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Mr. Wilder, do you have any other questions?
No, I guess that answers my question. I'm disappointed we can't do more, but that's fine. Thank you.
Ms. Oak-Charon, please.
Thank you. I share some of Mr. Wilder's concerns, and this is a lot of lot coverage. I'm just wondering if you considered any other designs for this particular lot.
So the comment about lot coverage is intriguing to us, and Ms. Hode, on behalf of the Hintonburg Community Association, raised the same comment. What's interesting is that the reality is, as the lots get smaller, the amount of coverage and the percentage of the site that's being developed actually gets smaller, so that we have less development now than we would have if it was a fully conforming lot. And that's because we're still providing all of the required yards, front, corner, interior, and rear yard, and the additional yard requirements. The actual amount of development on the site is less when you talk about percentage of the site that's being developed than would be permitted as of right.
Thank you, Mr. Chown. Ms. Oak-Charon, is that sufficient? Mr. Hamilton, just back to you, just real briefly. You heard from Ms. Hode and you heard some of the feedback. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilder and Mr. Chown are correct. The existence of the severance application does change the administration of the yards. If there was no severance application, the building would likely be able to be built without the additional variance. Staff note that the building was built with all the required setbacks, so we're not looking at the development as overdevelopment. All the required setbacks are being met. So we have no concerns at this time.
Okay. And how about the comments, the closing comments by Ms. Hode regarding the ground floor?
Sorry, was that with respect to the secondary dwelling units or the floor plans?
Yes, no, the secondary dwelling.
We don't expect any issues with in the future or currently with non-compliance with the zoning bylaw with the secondary dwelling units.
Okay, thank you. Members of the committee, are there any other questions? Are we prepared to vote on this? Seeing no opposition on voting on approval. That's a tie. So that is not approved. On to the next item. So we are on to item number 8. And we have Lyndon Holmes as the agent for the applicant and 2 other speakers potentially, but I believe we do actually have a sworn oath now. And I do also believe that Mr. Hamilton has some recommended changes to some wording, so we'll get to that momentarily. If we could have the agent for the applicant.
She's good. Here I am. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Lyndon Holmes. I'm the homeowner at 21 Gordon Street. I'm not an agent. I'm just the homeowner. So please be indulgent that I can do this properly. Okay. I have 4 requests. One of them I can drop out, the eaves. So the first one is to allow me to construct a carport at the end of my driveway. And the streetscape analysis says that carports aren't permitted in my neighborhood, but there are many of them around there, around the block of my house, around both sides and on the back street and on several streets. I've included pictures of a dozen of them. Whoops, what happened here? In my submission. And oh, there's pictures appearing here from my submission. Okay. So I've tried to plan the carport so it would be very minimalist, and it's at the back of the driveway. You wouldn't see it unless you were at the end of the driveway. And I'm proposing that to be, it's an aging in place project. The driveway is very icy with icicles dropping down each side. My car gets covered in freezing rain and I can't get into it. So I'm hoping that I can have a little carport approved for the end of my driveway. So in order to do that, the posts have to go out a little further than what's permitted. They would go to within 5.58 meters of the property line. That still leaves over a meter between the posts and the neighbor's wall. You could put a snowblower down there, and I usually clear that for my neighbor. The third thing about the carport is I think I can take this one out. I have recently learned that my neighbor Karen is going to change her steel roof. So I had asked for an 18-inch, a 46-inch eave to catch the snow that pours down, crashes down. But if that roof is changed, I don't need that. So according to my calculations, if I reduce that eave to only 28 centimeters, I would meet the requirement. It would be within 30 centimeters of the property line, and I wouldn't need a variation for that. So I'm quite willing to reduce the eaves because I wouldn't need that much of an overhang with the change in the steel roof. The fourth variation is to ask for 10 centimeters added to the permitted 2 meters to cover my front porch, which is an open deck. It's extremely hot and the sun beats in the front there. And it would be nice to have protection from the elements and to have some shade at my front doorstep there. So, and the other porches in the neighborhood are covered, and it would make my porch match theirs. So I want to correct something that was said in one of the comments from Jeff Sloan. He claimed that the edge of my deck is only 2 meters from the property line, from the sidewalk, excuse me, where the average is 4 meters. But in fact, the edge of that existing deck is 2 meters from the city line. And I measured yesterday and it's 4.7 meters from the sidewalk. So it is actually more than the average. So I'm not going to be sticking out any further. The request is only for the extra 10 centimeters so that the roof, the flat cover, would match the edge of the deck. It would let me put a drip guard there, and the drainage will be in eaves. So those are the 4 requests. So if I reduce my request for the eaves to only 28 centimeters, I don't believe I need a variance there because there would indeed be 30 centimeters to the property line, if I'm calculating that correctly.
Okay. Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, I mean, I'm sure you hear from angry citizens a lot, but I was quite distressed to receive, 17 pages of complaints about every improvement that I've made to the house over the last 15 years, of which I've had building permits. My house the complaints seem to claim that my home is overdeveloped, but my home is only 1,700 square feet. It's a very modest dwelling. It's small compared to the big 3-story infills that you get. I've planned the 2 small projects to fit with the house and to be attractive. And I don't think that my proposals represent any overdevelopment. I know that my neighbor Camille has registered a lot of complaints on this, but please take note that my immediate neighbor to the north, who might be affected by the cover on the deck, have not registered any objection to this at all. And my neighbor to the south, Karen, I worked with her extensively to develop the proposal for the carport. I had her out in the driveway doing measurements and photos, and she's completely happy with this and in support of that. The only people who would actually see the carport are my neighbors, Gord and Zelda, who are across the street from me, and they have given me a lovely letter of support. They have no problem with this. I knocked on 11 doors of my neighbors on Gordon Street to see how they felt about my proposal, and people were really positive and supportive, and nobody had any concerns. The 2 people who had concerns around the corner on Ellis Street, one of them is away for 6 months of the year in Mexico and never uses Gordon Street. The others seem to be overly concerned with parking that might result from the 2 renters that I have, but I only rent long-term and I don't accept anyone who has a car, so there is no impact on that. Camille Lewis has registered a lot of objections. She's in the far semi at the corner. Those houses are tiny and they're set back further, so mine is the first one of the 6 ones that are similar in a row. A lot of the complaints that Camille has registered seem to be implying that I have sort of sneakily disobeyed the rules and created some kind of monstrous anomaly here. But I had building permits for all of the improvements that I have done to my house. I try to be a good neighbor. If I'm making any changes, I talk to my neighbors. In particular, with the rebuild of my rotted front deck, where I modified the footprint a little, I talked to my neighbors, and Camille made no objection at that time. So I think it's unfair to complain 11 years later that this isn't suitable. So I was upset to receive such an extensive list of complaints about things that I had building permits for. And I don't think that I'm turning my house into something that is going to be unattractive on the street. I think it will fit in beautifully. And I think the positive response that I've had from most of my neighbors and the letters of support my proposal, and that these would help me to age in place. I'll live on the ground floor when I'm older, and it would be nice to have a covered front porch to sit out. And the covered carport, the small carport at the back, will help me be safe and help me to bring my bins to the sidewalk where there's no ice. So Camille and Sally, who know each other, can go ahead and make their complaints. But the complaints came in very late, and I typed up a list in response to them and addressed all the items in their complaints. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation, but I hope that committee members received them. I would ask you to read them before you make your decision.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hamilton, I know you did make some recommendations on changes to conditions. And maybe before we get into those, there was a suggestion that the third variance may no longer be applicable. Can we get your opinion on that?
Certainly, we have not received any revised plans showing this, so I can't exactly review it and confirm, but it does appear that the eaves would be able to be permitted and the variance could be removed. I don't know if that causes issues with the Ontario Building Code, though, so I would caution against that.
Yeah, so what you're saying is based on what you've heard, it may be that could be deleted, and that would be if the applicant chose to go that route, then at that point they would have to comply with the code and the zoning provisions.
I think it would give me a eaves that would be about 10 inches, which would be just fine.
Okay, thank you. Member McLean, did you have a question or comment?
Could I just ask planning staff, Mr. Hamilton, when dealing with the setback for a carport, is it not measured to the edge of the roof, or do we have a side yard to a post and then an eave extension?
We are, or through you, Mr. Chair, we are reviewing the interior side yard to the posts, which would be the hypothetical exterior of the garage if it were a garage, and then we review the projections or the eaves separately under section 65 of the zoning bylaw.
And if I can add, if I take away the request for the
excuse me, Ms. Holmes, just our members asking questions now. We'll get back to you. We'll give you a moment later.
Thank you. So just a question then to the applicant. I had a bit of difficulty lining up your site plan with the old survey, and typically we would want an up-to-date survey plan.
I know.
When we're dealing with proposed constructions, but just what is the size of the carport?
The carport is, let me go here, the posts go to the roof. If I take away the request for the eave, the roof would be just over 3 meters. And it is 4.9 meters in length. And I believe Mr. Hamilton said the standard is 5.2. It's a little bit shorter than what would be for a parking place. I didn't want to go beyond the brick wall. My little station wagon would fit under that just fine. It's mainly so that the front of my car doesn't get, and the driver's door doesn't get covered in ice, so that I can get into the car. So the length of the carport at 4.9 meters would be slightly less. And the roof width without the extra eaves would be just over 3 meters. And there'd still be, there is a meter, more than a meter between the posts and my neighbor's wall.
And so can I just ask to Mr. Hamilton then, just does this meet the requirement for a parking space, this carport? Given that the length is only going to be 4.92 meters.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the dimension was not shown, so I did note the minimum required parking space requirements. If that space can be shown to be within the posts and the wall of the home, then that would be sufficient.
That would be the width. What about the length? If the length is only 4.9?
The parking space is independent of the carport. The parking space can extend beyond the carport. The front yard setback is quite small on this property, so it would still be compliant because the parking space would not exist in the front yard.
Okay, thank you. And then I guess finally, if there are changes to plans, then I think we're going to be looking for some kind of revision. I'll just leave it at that point.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Mr. Hamilton, we will go back to your suggested changes after we've heard from everyone, just to make sure that we capture what we hear today. And so we do have some other speakers today. We have Ms. Juden or Juden.
Hi.
Hi there. Your name for the record and your address, please.
It's Sally Juden, and I'm at 14 Gordon Street, and I can't seem to turn my camera on. Is that me or is that you?
It's you, so lower left there.
Oh my God, she's got a presentation.
Okay, so you have 5 minutes to speak to the application, Ms. Juden. If you would please proceed.
Okay, So first of all, I just want to make a quick comment on Lyndon's many carports. I've lived in this neighborhood all my life. I don't know that there are many carports. I see that she didn't include them. Okay, so I'm going to go quick because I've timed myself doing this presentation and I can do it in just 5 minutes. So I'm one of the owners of 14 and 16 Gordon Street, which are across the street from 21 Gordon Street. I've submitted comments in writing asking that the committee reject the request for the proposed variances to 21 Gordon Street. The proposed variances do not meet any of the 4 statutory tests as described in Section 45 of the Planning Act. I've stated my support for my rationale in my written submission, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. So I've lived on Gordon Street for 30 years, first at 36 Gordon Street, and now, at the time I had 2 young children, we needed a bigger house. We moved 2 houses up to 14 Gordon Street, and we also own 16 where my in-laws live. The 21 Gordon Street proposal is to build a carport as well as a roof over the deck that is in the front yard. The report by the city planning staff already recommends against the carport based on, yeah, I haven't even got into the slides yet. So the report by the city planning staff already recommends against the carport based on the mature neighborhood overlay zoning that ensures that only proposed developments which are compatible with and reinforce the look along the street are permitted, as well as because of issues of snowfall, rain, and maintenance. So I'm going to focus on the proposed deck roof because the information submitted has led to the misunderstanding that the proposal is to restore the look of the front house. The report states that this proposal would allow the owner to construct a facade element properly aligning with the front wall of the porch. And it states a continuous facade contributes to the character of the neighborhood and aligns with similarly designed covered porches on adjacent properties. I agree that that's a desirable effect, and I wish that were the case here. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The facade of this property is already significantly out of line with the character of the streetscape, and this addition is going to make it worse because it is not in alignment with the porches on adjacent properties, and I'll show this to you. So first of all, I'm sure that you already know this. Gordon Street and the nearby streets, Ella, Newton, and Muriel, are some of the smaller streets in the glebe and are made up of smaller houses, much smaller houses than those in the avenues or in the northern part of the glebe. As such, they are targets for demolition and overdevelopment. While there are some monster cube houses and some houses that have had a significant number of additions, Gordon Street has not been as badly affected as it could have been. So slide 1, please. So 21 Gordon Street is one of 6 identical houses that all appear on the 1912 fire insurance plan map. They all have similar features and they were all laid out on the lots to create a boulevard effect. So next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Thanks. So here are 2 of those 6 houses that still retain many of the original features. You can see they both have those barn style roofs, the porch, the sloped porch roof, and some of them still have the caps on the porch roofs. Okay, and then the next slide also, it shows the layout on the street. So from the fire insurance plan map, you can see those houses in the middle block. And from Google Earth 2022, you can see those same houses laid out there. In fact, on this, the second from the top structure is 21 Gordon Street, and you can see the roof of the porch in that picture. So the proposal here is to double the size of that roof. Alrighty. Slide 4, sorry, next slide. 1940s. This is just looking straight up Gordon Street. It's the same, it's practically the same today. That's all, just keep going, thanks. So next slide. Okay, the roof over deck proposal, it seems straightforward, but it's been interpreted in a very positive manner by the city staff, but you have to realize that the proposal is actually a minor variance for a roof to go over the deck that was added in front of the porch through the minor variance process. The proposal asks for relief of 0.1 meters, but it's really the entire roof that should have been identified as a variance, and it's a significant departure from the streetscape. It should not be allowed under the protection of the MNO. The request is to create a second porch in front of the porch, which would double the size of the porch. It would be twice as large as any porch on the street. It would project significantly into the front yard, and it would be a visual impediment to the immediate neighbors. By the way, they have submitted opposition to it. It would also be a visual impediment to the general public. Her current porch, the enclosed veranda, is 20 meters squared. This would create a porch that is 41 meters squared. There's not a single porch on the street that's that large. And so here's how we got here. Next slide, please. So this is it. This is the house in 1995. And I'm going to focus in on the porch. So the porch here has already been modified. It's got windows and vinyl siding. But as you can see on the next slide, please, looking down the street, it doesn't look that different from the rest of the porches. So next slide, please. In 1995, through a request for a minor variance, she asked for the landing in front of the door to be enlarged. So it was enlarged across the whole house. And now there's a deck on the porch. Next slide, please. On this next slide, it's very dark. You can't see it very well, but you can see that deck sticking out from the rest of the porches now. Okay, and then the next slide, please. And here we start to go into, this is like death by minor variance. This is a significant change. You can see a whole style change here. The roof on her porch is flat. The facade is altered. The windows on the end of the porch have been replaced with vinyl siding, and you've got the small retaining walls that have been built. And then next slide, please. This is the site for the proposed carport. So 2022 additions. This is a picture of the deck today. It's doubled in depth, and you can see the retaining walls that have been built up. On the second slide, sorry, next slide, please. You can see how the north wall of the porch is closed off now, and the deck is projecting out into the yard far beyond the depth of the adjoining properties. And this is what she wants to put a roof on. So, sorry, next slide, please. I've done my own streetscape analysis. I included the properties as according to the instructions on the City of Ottawa site. Next slide, please. And I've included features that are typical of the Gordon Street porches. And I included the 1912 information just for context. So next slide, please. So my findings were that many of these houses existed in 1912, mostly on her side of the street. So they're over 100 years old. 19 of the 21 porches are open porches. It's only 21 Gordon Street and one other porch that have enclosed the porch. The porches typically have sloped roofs, and again, 21 Gordon Street is one of the only two that have a flat roof. The dominant features, sorry, next slide, please. The dominant features are that the porches are all at least 4 meters away from the lot line. That was my mistake on the calculation. I used the wrong word. And I'm not calling the deck on 21 Gordon Street a porch. 21 Gordon Street is the only one that has anything built in front of the porch. I think it's evident that the proposal for a roof over the deck that is projecting out from the 21 Gordon Street porch is not at all in line with the dominant features of the Gordon Street streetscape. Can you just, yeah, next slide, please. So this is my artist's rendition of the deck roof. And you can see that it's going to stick right out into it and impede everybody's view down the street. So I understand that there may be some support, and I would ask that you disregard any support that is not specific to how this is in line with the zoning, and discount any support that comes from someone with a vested interest, such as someone seeking to develop their own property in a manner that's outside of the zoning regulations. I ask that the committee apply the protection of the mature neighborhood overlay zoning and reject the variance requests. Thank you. And I've attached a few more slides in this presentation and in another presentation of additional lovely houses on Gordon Street for your reference, because I think it's important to see what's going on. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Members of committee, Ms. McLean, you have your hand up. Did you have a question?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I hadn't taken it down from before.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of committee? Do you have questions, comments? No. Okay, we'll move to the next speaker, Ms. Lewis.
The famous unmute. My apologies. My name is Camille Lewis, and I live at 17 Gordon Street. I will try to be as brief as, as brief as possible. I would like to say that I really learned about the details of this, the proposed development upon the notice arriving at my house on June the 23rd. And then some information that I had requested in when the applicant first approached me at the end of May, outlining what, kind of in the air, what the new development would look like at the front, and actually summarily letting me know that the carport should be of no consequence to me, and my opinion wasn't being asked. I had asked for a side elevation of the front porch. So a sketch was provided to me on June the 24th. And I have actually taken vacation days and used my Canada Day in order to try to research this as best as possible. And for 2 weeks in June, I had COVID. So it's been quite a transition to today. So if you would indulge me with some time, I would very much appreciate it. The applicant is my neighbor, Lyndon Holmes, who I'm referring to as the applicant or generically for the committee's convenience only. You do hear a lot of applications. I have lived at number 17 since February 2001. The proximity of our properties is shown on the attached survey, which is included on pages 8 and 9. If the coordinator could go to pages 8 and 8 first, please, of my letter. And you may want to, so the lower corner shows the kind of dominant page numbers because I wanted to use this for both my letter and my presentation. So on you might want to zoom in, Ms. Coordinator. I believe it may be Mandy is the coordinator. You might want to zoom in a bit. But this is just to, I provided this snippet of our 1996 survey because it shows that the combined width of number 17 and 19 is 10 meters, 0.06. As the applicant's aerial site plan shows, I believe the lot at number 21 is 9.2 meters wide. So what happens at number 21, it has quite a pronounced effect on both 17 and 19. So to clarify, I am number 17, which is farthest away. And then number 19 is sandwiched in between us. Our property, and it was before either of us owned it, it was a single property up until 1996 when it was severed. And this survey is registered. Then on page 9, if you would scroll, please, thank you, on the left. So on page 9, this is a 2017 survey. So it's just, it shows the consistency of the measurements. And we note that the distance between number 19 and the principal building 21 was measured with, contemporary tools at 0.49 of a meter. But these are site conditions that were established circa like 1910, 1917, and all of the current homeowners did buy into the street with its appeal intact as it was in 1917. So we can go back to page 1, please. So I referred in my introduction to some supplementary information that was provided to me on June the 24th. It is attached as page 10 I'm sorry to ask you to go back to page 10. This is referred, it's titled Figure 2, and so it's now on your right-hand side. And while 17 and 19, we are on the north, this view, which I believe is from the south, was emailed to me by the applicant. And I do feel that it's not a complete visual or set of information. The third post that is visible in the aerial is not showing on this, I guess it's two-dimensional view, but you will note on the site plan with the application that there is one post that's closer, the proposed third. If it's the right-hand post, I guess it's the third post. It's closer to the house than the other two posts. So it's missing from this side view. The eaves do not show any a gutter, which if you inspect any of the current photographs, there will always be a gutter involved. So there's also another 10 centimeters. So in terms of providing the information needed for some of the nearest neighbors to make a decision and some of the most affected, I did find that it was lacking, and it was quite late in the process, the due process. So if we would go back to page 1, please. I was told that everyone is, so in late May, I was told that everyone is supportive, quote unquote, and yet I'm aware of several concerned neighbors, plus my own conclusion. And having studied the situation, reviewed surveys, official plans, bylaws as best as I am able, and made inquiries with the city's planning department, my view is that the proposed developments are not desirable for the neighborhood and would have adverse impacts on both the subject property and nearby neighbors, and therefore the application should not be approved. Accordingly, I have to register my objections to all 4 of the minor variances, albeit I believe one has been removed today, that would enable the proposed developments. If you would please turn to page 11. I have 3 main issues. One is the proposed developments are not coherent with the existing desirable character of the neighborhood. As you can see at the bottom of page 11, this is the streetscape on the east side of Gordon, which I've referred to as the 6 Sisters. And I think Ms. Juden has also referred to this streetscape quite comprehensively. So I won't dwell on it, but we do note the kind of a pleasing rhythmic nature to the streetscape that is actually on both sides. And in terms of sensitivity to the neighborhood, the note that the unobstructed front yards at the houses to the south of the subject property, allow for some flexibility in families walking and kids riding their bikes and learning to ride their bikes. And, nobody who falls off their bike is going to fall into the road at some of those southerly properties. And I have to really emphasize how this openness helps this neighborhood function so wonderfully. If you turn to page 12, it's the other side of the street. And although different in terms of the peaked roofs, I have here, I didn't know if to call them, whether it's the 5 brothers or just the 5 peaks. We have a very consistent pattern stepping up. This is looking north of homes. And again, with an unobstructed area immediately on the sidewalk. So, and note too here on this side, how all the verandas read as permitted projections. If you would return to page 2, please. So the Ottawa's planning framework includes that development in mature neighborhoods will be consistent with the dominant streetscape. That's required by heritage category number 5. I note that in understanding what streetscape can involve is that I looked at the manual and noted, so if in this example that's been insert on page 2, that this is explained to readers that the house on the right has a front door that's part of a permitted projection, quote unquote. And you'll see that these are enclosed verandas. And it says are part of a permitted projection such as a porch, but doesn't face the front lot line. So there, an enclosed veranda with a door that's not facing the porch would still be found to be consistent, but it clearly describes it as a permitted projection, which is consistent with my view of the subject property. And that is that the existing enclosed veranda at the subject property is truly the permitted projection and not the main principal building from which projections should be measured. Number 2 of an issue is that if the application erroneously uses the front wall of the enclosed veranda as the baseline for measuring its permitted projections, which, if processed, inadvertently condones and expands adverse impacts for nearest neighbors and some unintended consequences of ongoing development. I know I have tried to obtain the all building permits that may have been issued in connection with the series of developments from 2005 onwards. And I just haven't had the time to go to, I think it's building services, and to confirm that. And there have been times, such as in 2012, when the permitted, like known to be permitted, because I've now seen the 1995 variance request, to be enlarged, just what were the terms and conditions of that building permit if it was so developed or issued. And there are times in one's life where you don't have the time to perhaps devote to the scrutiny that this has required. And unfortunately, the conflict that this unfortunately entails, which is not anyone's desire. So with respect to some of these unintended consequences of the 1995 permission to vary, Ms. Juden has covered kind of what happened and how did we get to here quite well. I'll just give you some numbers. Is that the change that was sought would result in new construction at the time of 2.65 meters. And that's made up of, so as a projection, that's made up of 1.15 meters deep for the new landing, and the stairs, their depth is 1.15. So that's the total of 2.65 that was being sought at the time. Now you need to add the depth of the existing enclosed veranda, 1.9, to get beyond the 4 meters that the committee recognizes in 1995 as at that point being the limitation, which is 2/3 of the the required front yard of 6 meters. So at that time in 1995, the committee and zoning recognizes that the brick wall is the main principal building. And if you quickly go to page 5.
Ms. Lewis,
Yes.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up in the next 2 minutes. You've
Okay.
had well over the standard 5 minutes. You're
Okay.
into 10 minutes now.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that heads up. Thank you. And for the indulgence thus far. So I would ask then that we go back to page 3. We have, again, Ms. Juden has talked about some of the, like, what I would find are devolving site conditions as opposed to site conditions bringing the property into more compatible development with the streetscape. And I think the more we know, the more we understand how the compatibility of a streetscape and development that achieves that, how desirable that is. One of the items that hasn't come up yet is that how developed is this property? How does it serve the applicant's needs? And I have included in my letter a link to the property's Airbnb site, which is, if it can be found in Airbnb Glebe, and you will find the front face that you see here on page 4. At the bottom of page 4, actually, I think I may have taken that from the Airbnb, where the applicant is described as a superhost. And there are a series of excellent photos which would let you know how the property is developed. The rear yard is an oasis. It provides a lot of shade if it's very hot at the front. It is, there is a 10-meter high fence to the east. It is completely private. So I would bring that to your attention because it also shows some 2019 development kind of sealing off the south side of the property between those interior lots. On page 4, lastly, I have done a best efforts illustration of what the new and increased shadowing would be. Page 4, sorry. I'm using single pages, not the double page view. New and increased shadowing directly onto number 19's front main window. They only have one front main floor window, and it would be, and you can see it behind this kind of imposed gray area that I've mocked up. I don't have great software. So, and notably, I know that those owners have submitted a letter of objection. So in closing, I'd like to say that I believe that the heat management concerns of the applicant are resolvable. I note that in the past at the front, some significant trees have developed. It seems that now when they reach a medium age, they come down. So in the last few years, 3 or 4 trees have not been able to grow, and perhaps there was a change in vision. I'm not sure, but we're not getting towards the mature trees, even of the more small native variety. And then also concerns about snow management. I know the applicant has lived there for about 32 years and has fared well. And of course, if the roof were to remain metal, there are snow guards. We have some at the back. So in order to conclude, I would just ask that the Committee of Adjustments not crystallize some unintended consequences that have come to us, that we've reached at this point, and not allow the current request for development. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you. Members of committee, are there any questions for the 2 speakers that spoke after Ms. Holmes? Not yet. You will have a chance. So members of committee, do you have any questions for the 2 speakers? Seeing none. Okay, just before we give you a chance to wrap up, Ms. Holmes, I just would like to have Mr. Hamilton back for a moment, and then we'll give you a chance to wrap up. So Mr. Hamilton, you made some suggested changes, and we now know that perhaps the 3rd variance could be disposed of, and that would be at the at the applicant's decision to do that. And should everything find its way to being approved, if this committee were so inclined to approve it, then so be it. If not, then there's an issue for the applicant to deal with later, and that could be by way of buildings or this committee. But if you would mind just walking us through your recommended changes to A, B, and D, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. All of the variances, I would note that all of the variances as written are technically correct. I did receive some questions about the zoning bylaw and how they apply, just arising from the wording of the variances, because only portions of the provisions were transcribed into the application form. So the revisions to variance A is just the correct wording from the actual provision from section 140 that does not change the variance. And the same with variance C. Variance D was revised largely just to include the second portion of the provision for projections into a front yard. It is one provision, but there are two elements in this provision. It is a maximum projection from the home into a required yard of 2 meters. And the second half of that provision is that the projection can be no closer than 0.8 meters to a lot line. So that was added in for clarity.
And members of committee, do you have any questions or comments about those changes by staff? Okay, Mr. Hamilton, I think you may be done, but just hang on for a bit. We're going to ask Ms. Holmes just to wrap up quickly, and then this committee will reserve on our decision on this. I can tell you that already. Ms. Holmes, please, you can have a couple of minutes just to respond to anything that relates to the requests that you've made.
Thank you very much. Okay. What is called the porch or the sun porch is not a porch. It's a part of the house. It is open to the interior of the house. It is the office and the sitting room for the front room that I rent on a long-term basis. And it is the front of it is the front of the permissible place where you can build. So I believe it is the legitimate place from which you are allowed to project on. It's interesting that Ms. Sloan opposes a carport when her husband has built one in their own driveway to protect her car. So it's interesting that they are objecting to one that I have. In terms of carports, there are carports right around the corner on Ella and Newton and on Craig Street and on Morris and Ralph. I've included pictures of a dozen of them in my submission. And it's an evolving neighborhood, and we have people getting older and we have freezing rain, and it's a very low-key way to protect people and keep them safe. The deck in the front is 4.7 meters from the sidewalk, and the other houses get closer, a little bit closer as you go south. So my deck lines up with the porches to the south of me. The little semi-detached houses where Camille lives are small and set further back. I've particularly designed the roof cover on the deck to be extremely slim. It's only 9 inches deep, because I was cognizant of not wanting to block any winter sun to my neighbor immediately beside me. The sun sets on the driveway opposite me, and I believe that it won't shadow, won't provide any hindrance to the light in their front window. It will be very minimal. I feel that my house is designed to fit with the others on the streetscape. People down the row of the 6 houses have no concern about this. They would be the ones who would be saying that this doesn't fit. It doesn't project any further out than the porches that go below me to the south. So I feel that it will fit nicely. The cover on the porch will fit with the other verandas. I've tried The umbrellas, they blow, they fall apart. I would like to have some snow and ice protection also at my front door to make it safer. And I do feel that, I mean, the people who are Karen to the south of me and the people who will see this directly across the street are fully in support. Camille has lilac bushes and trees all around her front porch, so she doesn't even see the front of my house from the front of her house.
It would just stay to the issues that you're trying to address. It's not what's on her property, it's what's on your
I
property.
understand, yeah. So in fact, the edge of my existing front deck lines up with the other porches down Gordon Street. It does not stick out any further. I have a generous front yard. There's lots of room there. And it will complement the porches on that side of the street and fit in with them, I feel.
Okay, thank you. So to recap, you heard Mr. Hamilton's summary of A, B, and D. You've requested the removal of C. And so if this committee were inclined to approve the way you've heard those three conditions put to you, or not conditions, but variances put to you, you do not object to Mr. Hamilton's wording?
No,
Okay,
no,
thank
I
you.
will do whatever is required. And I want to speak to, there will be an eaves on the side of the front cover so that it doesn't project any further out. The drainage will go to the side with the downspout down the post into the planter box. So there will not be any additional eaves on the front. I've made it. My understanding is that I'm permitted to have a projection 2 meters from the front of the house. And this is only asking for 10 centimeters more to make the roof cover match the bottom of the existing deck and to allow for a drip guard. So there will be no eaves there. I don't want to make it any deeper.
Thank you. Members of committee, do you have any questions or comments before we wrap up? Okay. This matter is going to be dealt with in reserve.
Thank you.
The committee will render its decision within 10 days. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Okay, we are moving on to item number 9, 250 Rochester Street. Nine and 10. And speaker is Ms. Thompson.
Hello, my name is Erin Duncan, and I will be representing Jane Thompson Architect, who's the agent for the applicant.
Thank you. Your address, please, Ms. Duncan.
404 McKay Street.
Okay, and I'll just administer the oath. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time.
Yes, it was.
Okay, you have 5 minutes to make your presentation. Please proceed.
Okay, now we can start the slides. Okay, so in this first slide, it's the context plan. 250 Rochester Street is highlighted in the middle with the star. There's an existing 2-story building to the left of the blue building, and the blue building will be the new proposed. And we're asking for a severance down the middle, which is the red line. The subject property is located between Poplar and Balsam on Rochester Street. Rochester Street runs north-south and the property faces east. You'll note the close proximity of the existing buildings on the surrounding blocks. To the south, which is on the left-hand side of the page, there's a tall apartment tower and a new large development currently under construction. Next slide, please. The subject property is located in the middle top photo. It shows the existing 2-story brick building, which is to be retained, which is the on the right-hand side of the middle photo. And on the south side, there's currently a parking lot, which will be severed, and a new 2-story, 6-unit stacked building will be constructed in place of the current parking lot. The photos on either side show the adjacent buildings. So the one to the left, the first photo, is to the south, and then on the right-hand side of the top row are the 2 adjacent buildings. You'll note again the close proximity of the buildings in the existing conditions. The photo in the middle row shows on the left is a panoramic of the site, which shows the apartment tower to the south of the property. And the next 2 photos show views from the existing parking lot on 250 Rochester Street. So the middle photo in the second row is the side of the existing building. And then the last photo in the middle row is standing in the parking lot, looking towards Balsam Street. The last row, left-hand side, shows a view in front of 250 Rochester Street, looking south, showing the new development across from the tower. So the new development is on the left-hand side and the tower is just to the right, with some additional context photos in the next 2. Next slide. The top right-hand side shows the buildings directly across from 250 Rochester Street, which are currently abandoned. The left photo shows the corner of Rochester and Willow, which is showing a mix of commercial and residential, which is sort of typical in the neighborhood. And the next 4 photos highlight buildings on Rochester Street as you move north. You'll note the pattern of the buildings with driveways between, accessing parking at the rear. Next slide. The next slide, this slide is of our plan, which with the proposed severance creating 4 parts. Part 1 and 2 will be retained with the existing building. Part 2 will be an easement allowing access for the new proposed building. Part 3 and 4 will be severed and a new 2-story, 6-unit stacked building will be constructed, with parts 3 being an easement for the existing property. The easements will form a shared driveway between the existing and new building to allow 2 existing parking spots to remain behind the existing building and allow access to enclosed bicycle parking behind the new building. There will be no parking for cars on the new lot. Next slide. This slide is of the site plan. So it shows the retained building to the north, which is at the top of the page. And the new proposed building is on the south side, which is on the bottom of the page. The lot created for the existing building will be 7.94 meters wide with a 1.1 meter easement by 30.83 meters deep, and will have an area of 244.85 meters squared, and it will not require any variances. The severed lot for the new building will be 8.3 meters wide with a 1.5 meter easement by 30.83 meters deep, and will have an area of 258.65 meters squared. Under the R4 UDC zoning for a stacked building, there will be a requirement for 4 variances. The first variance is to permit a reduced lot area of 258 meters squared, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 420 meters squared. Second, to permit a reduced lot width of 8.3 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 14 meters. Third variance would be to permit a reduced interior side yard setback of 0.6 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum of 1.5 meters. And the fourth variance is to permit a reduced uncovered balcony projection into a required yard of 0.6 meters to a lot line, whereas the bylaw requires a projection no closer than 1 meter. I'll just highlight the last two variances. The first two, I think, speak for themselves, the reduced lot width and lot area. For the last two, the reduced interior side yard setback of 0.6 meters is on the south side, which is located at the bottom of the page and is adjacent to 254 Rochester Street. The setback for 254 Rochester to the same property line is 0.08 meters. So it's quite close to the property line on that side. The setback of 0.6 meters is in keeping with the pattern of the existing buildings and mimics the 0.59 meter setbacks of the existing retained building. The variance for the balcony projection is located on the same side of the property. There is a second-story balcony at the front and the rear of the property, which both project legally into the yard. However, a balcony is not allowed to be closer than 1 meter to the property line. The balconies will be in line with the south side of the building and will therefore require a variance to be located at the 0.6 meters from the side property line. Opaque screens will be required on the sides of the balcony closest to the adjacent neighbors, which we will be installing. And then just further on this site plan, just to highlight a few things. So the shared driveway is created between the two buildings and it accesses the two existing parking spots behind the existing building. And then there's an enclosed bicycle parking at the rear behind the new building. And then there's shared access to garbage in the new building on the in the shared driveway. The 6 new units are designed as back-to-back stacked dwellings with direct access to the exterior from each unit. 3 units face onto Rochester Street and 3 face onto the rear yard. There's a landscaped area at the rear, which is highlighted in green, and there's a new proposed tree in the rear yard. There's also 2 new trees proposed at the front on Rochester Street, which I will speak to in just a moment. Next slide, please. So these are the plans of the units. So the top of the page shows the basement unit, the basement units back to back, and the bottom of the page shows the ground floor units. So on the right-hand side would be Rochester Street, and then you would access either the basement apartment or the ground floor or the second story unit from Rochester Street, and then they each are a 1-bedroom unit, so basement, ground, and second, and then those same units are mirrored onto the back, so you would have the same access, but just from the rear yard, and they're all 1-bedroom units. And then you'll also note that the glazing is all oriented towards the front, rear, or the shared driveway. There's no required glazing on the south side, which is where we're asking for the reduced side yard setback. Next slide. The top of the page shows the second floor units, again, back-to-back design, and the balconies are off the second floor, so at the front and the rear. And the bottom of the page shows the roof plan for our which will house our stormwater management retention. Next slide. The left-hand side of the page shows the front elevation on Rochester Street with large glazing and access to the 3 units. And then there's the balcony on the 2nd floor with opaque screens. The materials will be high quality with brick facing the street and wrapping down the shared driveway, and transitioning to a wood grain metal siding at the rear. The rear elevation is on the right-hand side of the page and mimics the look of the front elevation. Next slide. This shows the shared driveway side. So there's a good amount of glazing. There's the shared access to the garbage for garbage recycling and compost. Next slide. And then this is the blank wall condition where we're asking for the reduced side yard setback. This elevation will have a low maintenance metal siding as well as the opaque screens. Next slide. So currently there's a street tree on Rochester Street, which is growing very close to the hydro pole. The arborist and landscape architect have determined that the tree is in poor condition, and we are proposing the tree be removed to allow for 2 new trees to be planted along Rochester Street. I'll just highlight what the arborist has pointed out. So he refers to tree number 1. It says the roots are very high under the asphalt and interlock surfaces. Note heaving. Because of the poor structure, this tree is prone to failure, especially during storms. This tree won't survive construction due to combined loss of roots and surface rigidity provided by existing hardscape. Poor species and poor specimen, heavily pruned by hydro. Crown is strongly divergent as a result. Regardless of construction impacts, this tree should be removed for safety reasons. So you'll note in the photos how the ground is currently heaving underneath the tree. And
That
how
tree is, excuse me, that tree would, I assume is on city right of way?
it is, yes.
Yes, okay. And so you'll have to go through the appropriate steps to remove that through the city forester?
Yes, which we are addressing through site plan control, which we are almost through.
And that was actually a question of mine, and I was going to wait, but given you raised it, at what stage are you at in the site plan?
We've addressed all the comments from site plan control, so we're just waiting for the final approval.
So you feel the drawings are final, everything's as far as you know anyways, they're ready to go, and it's a matter of getting an administrative approval. Is that where you're at?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
so. Yeah.
Okay, sorry to interrupt. Go, if
No,
you could
that's
wrap up,
okay.
please.
And one more slide. And so this is the landscape plan done by the landscape architect, just circled in red. The 2 trees at the front are the 2 new proposed trees. And then we're proposing 1 at the rear in the landscaped area. And there's also a new hedge being proposed at the rear as well.
Okay. Could you quickly address the 4 tests?
Yes. So we believe that the proposal meets the 4 tests. Test 1 variance meets the general intent of the official plan. Our proposal is consistent with the policies of the official plan, with good quality, modestly sized, affordable rent, stacked dwelling units, which would diversify the existing neighborhood housing supply. The proposed 6 1-bedroom units will complement the existing family-oriented townhouses within the center town west community and mirror neighboring lot patterns and sizes. Intensification in an established neighborhood with existing infrastructure and services. The retained property will have 2 off-street parking spots, while the severed lot will have enclosed bike parking, which fits 6 bicycles. The location offers a full range of services, recreation, and amenities within walking or cycling distance. The building aesthetic fits within the character of the neighborhood, including appropriate materials and details. The proposed building location conforms with the surrounding building patterns, creating sustainable intensification in the downtown area through utilizing land occupied by an existing surplus parking lot and constructing a building that provides 6 new affordable rental units. Protect and enhance the urban tree canopy with removal of an existing hazardous tree, protection of existing neighboring trees, and planting of 3 new additional trees. Test 2, the variance maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw. The subject property is zoned R4 UDC by the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Under this residential zone, many forms of dwellings are permitted, including detached and stacked dwellings. The new lot, while smaller in width and area than the zoning requirements, is similar in size to lots in the surrounding block. The proposed building coverage of the lot is also similar to the neighboring lots, and lot size is sufficient to meet landscaping requirements. The proposed lot width and lot area is proportional to the size of the proposed building, which is very compact for a 6-unit building and an important strategy for creating affordability for the owner and for future tenants. The proposed 0.6 meter setback is designed to provide necessary space for good drainage and maintenance between the buildings. The requested 0.6 meter side yard setback will also closely resemble the 0.59 meter distance at the existing building of 250 Rochester Street, as well as neighboring properties 244, 246, 254 Rochester Street. The side of the building adjacent to the 0.6 meter setback has been designed to be maintenance-free. The front and rear second floor balconies are in line with the building setback and are consistent with the neighboring balconies. Test 3, variance is desirable and appropriate for the development of the lands. The variance is desirable in that it will allow for the construction of a stacked building in the place of an existing parking lot, thereby providing 6 new dwelling units in the downtown area. The existing brick building will not be affected or altered with the introduction of the proposed structure. And test 4, the variance is minor in nature. The requested variances of a 250 meter square lot area, 8.39 meter lot width, and 0.6 meter interior yard setback of a proposed stacked building are minor and reasonable. The proposed setbacks mirror the general characteristics of the surrounding neighborhoods. And then with the consent to sever, the severance will create 2 lots, which are similar to the dimensions and shapes of surrounding lots, and the lands are suitable for the purpose for which they've been subdivided by increasing density in the downtown core, where there are adequate utilities and municipal services. Construction of natural resources, conservation of natural resources and flood control are addressed with the preservation of existing neighboring trees, additional plantings, and stormwater retention on the new proposed roof.
Thank you. Just one comment. We had a redundant, as you know, probably that one of the relief sought was repeated in one of the documents. So there's a variance E, which is identical to variance D, which will be removed. And what we understand from you and both from the comments from the planning department is that this matter is being dealt with through site plan, and therefore the planning department isn't looking for any specific conditions because they feel that they can be adequately addressed through the site plan process. And I see Member McLean has her hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just some questions for Ms. Duncan and then for the city planning staff. There was no consent application for the retained land, so I think there may be some difficulty in granting a right-of-way or easement over the retained lands for the benefit of the new parcel without an application. So I just wondered, had there been any discussion, or was there any reason you didn't file a second application?
The owner consulted with their lawyer and he believed that just the one application would be sufficient.
Okay, well, I'm not sure if that's the position, but I'll just leave it there.
I just wonder, Member McLean, given that it is through the site plan process, easements and rights of way can be dealt with under section 41. So I'm wondering if that might be the vehicle to address that. But your point is very well taken, but I wonder if that might be what planning staff might have been thinking as well. And maybe we can put that question to planning staff as well. Sorry to interrupt, but please proceed.
And the other question I had was, this is relatively recent zoning for this area, I believe. And I'm concerned about the lot width and lot area variances. Can you tell me what you could build on this as of right if you had this reduced lot width and lot area? Are you aware? Or maybe I can direct it to planning staff if you're not aware.
I know you could build exactly what is beside it. So the building to the north that's being retained, they would be allowed a 0.6 meter side yard setback, which is what we're asking for. It's the stacked unit that is creating the larger lot width, lot area, and larger setback requirements. We came up with the design that allows for a stacked unit to be in a compact building. So we're able to actually fit the 6 units within the lot area as we've proposed.
And if you didn't receive the variance for the reduced side yard, how would that impact the development?
It would be difficult to develop 6 units as we have them because we would need a 1.5 meter setback. So yes, we've designed it with the 0.6 meters.
And just my last comment, sort of, when you say that there's similar size lots in the area, I guess we don't know what the uses are on those lots. So the lot piece, the existing building on the retained lot, is it just a single family home?
Yes, it's a detached 2-story. It has the commercial suffix, so there is commercial as well in the building, and then there's apartments within that.
So there's a commercial component to the retained, or to the building on the retained land?
It's I don't know if it's officially, but yes, that whole area has the commercial suffix.
Yes, I understand that, but the dwelling on the retained land, what's the use?
It has commercial and residential.
Okay, but when you said there's similar size lots in the area, I guess it would have been helpful to know what the uses are on those size lots, whether they're stacked or duplexes or triplexes. But I'll just leave.
Okay, I was going to say in our application, in our context plan, it does highlight those. We could pull them up and look now.
But it doesn't give you what the use is on those lands. Am I right?
It does. Let me just see how we have them labeled. We do have a legend that, so we have there's 2-story detached, 2-story semi-detached, 2-story mixed use, 2-story abandoned, 2-story duplex, 2-story apartments. And then there's the 7-story apartments, 21-story apartment.
That wouldn't be on similar size lots, the apartment building.
The apartment building, no, that is not.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to move on to city planning staff for a minute. Ms. Linker, I wonder, can you just give us how you arrive at your position that you have no concerns with this, given that this is recent rezoning and the requirement for a stack is the 14 meters and the 420?
Yes, of course. Just to clarify, you're asking about the lot width and the lot area?
Yeah, given that it's recently rezoned, I think, this area to the R4UDC, how do you arrive in with the department's position that you have no concerns given those requirements?
Of course. Given those requirements, sorry, just 1 second, please. While I'm just pulling this up, on the retained lot, as the applicant has said, that building enjoys legal non-complying rights and no additional variances are required due to the severance created. There's no concerns from a planning standpoint about the newly created lot. It conforms with the pattern and the scale found in the neighborhood and maintains the low-rise nature of the surrounding area. It's recognized that these reductions are quite significant, but the proposed lot size and lot coverage are the same to that of neighboring lots, and the new lot size is sufficient in meeting the landscape requirements for the proposed stacked dwellings. So planning staff don't perceive any concerns from the reduction in lot size and lot width.
So can you tell me what use would be permitted on a lot width and a lot area of this that's proposed? What uses in the under the zone?
I'll have to look that up. I believe a single detached would be permitted under the proposed lot width and lot area. In terms of other uses, I'll just have to briefly look that up quickly.
Okay, but thank you.
I just
Just hold for one moment, Ms. Thompson. Ms. McLean, you comfortable just waiting and we'll go back to Ms. Linker in a moment or two?
Yes, yes.
Okay, any other members of committee, do you have any questions? Okay, Ms. Thompson, you had something to add?
I just wanted to make one response to Ms. McLean's comments, is that the size of our units are very, very small. They're tight, but comfortable 500 square foot. And so it's 6 of those, you're looking at a total 3,000 square foot building, which is not that different. So if you're thinking of a typical large sixplex, that's something very different from a single family house, but the whole scale of our development is sized down so that I think it's quite reasonable to look at a 3,000 square foot building as similar to a single family house or duplex as it would be to what you might have in a 6-unit development where you had, say, 1,000, 1,500 square foot units. And that the overall size and massing of the building looks exactly like the other buildings on the street, so that the overall building size is, even though it has 6 units in it, is very similar to the surrounding semi or single family houses.
Okay, thank you. To the committee coordinator, we did have another speaker. I believe it's the owner. Is he here today?
Mr. Chair, he is.
Would he like to speak? He's listed as a speaker.
He was just joining in case there were any questions he needed to answer.
So he doesn't feel the need. Okay, thank you. So members of committee, no further questions or comments. I think this will be one that we'd like to reserve on. Oh, Ms. Oakesharon, please go ahead.
I think I'll direct my question to Ms. Thompson just on your last point, talking about the size of the building and comparing it to other single family homes. But in this particular building, there's going to be multiple households, so 6 different households. I understand that they're small apartments, but could you speak to the impact? I'm thinking that there's a greater impact of having 6 households in the building on the property than in comparable single family size buildings.
Yes, certainly. It depends obviously how many bedrooms another unit is. So these are all 1-bedroom units that would have a maximum of 1 or 2 people. per unit. So that might be 6 to 12 occupants on the site. In each unit has been provided with an outdoor amenity space and landscape space that's larger than the requirement, so that we feel that we have provided the required amenity and landscaping space to deal with each one of those units, in addition to the enclosed storage for bikes, so that there won't be, it won't feel like a surplus belongings on the site. So we've made our efforts to provide the indoor and outdoor space that those occupants would require.
Okay, thank you. All of those households will have visitors, though, will have deliveries. I do think there's a greater impact than just with a regular one family household.
Thank you. Mr. Wilder, you did have your hand up a moment ago, but you're okay? Okay. On this matter, the committee will reserve on this and will issue a decision within 10 days. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
And if I'm not mistaken, that concludes our hearing. So members committee, we'll see you in a